What's up everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, I will cover changing the front brake pads in a 2014 through 2020 Chevy Impala. I will be changing the front left, so chalk the opposite wheel, which will be the rear right. First, break loose the lug nuts while it's still sitting on the ground. Next, jack up the vehicle and support it with a jack stand. Never support it with just the floor jack. Then, remove the lug nuts and remove the wheel. We will need to remove the two caliper bolts, one at the top of the caliper and one at the bottom of the caliper. Use a 14mm socket to break the two bolts loose, then remove them, and set them aside for later. Now the caliper is ready to remove. You may need a pry bar or a screwdriver to help pry it out of place. And after it's removed, it needs to be supported so it's not hanging by the brake hose. I personally like to use a metal coat hanger, route it through the caliper, and suspend it from something up above. In this particular case, I'm hanging it from a suspension coil. The weight of the caliper is supported by the coat hanger, and there is no weight on the brake hose. Next, remove the existing brake pads. There's one on each side, one on the outside, and one on the inside, and they will just slip out from the sides. I set them down in the orientation that they were removed. When bringing in the new pads, we can match them up. This is the outside pad, and this is the inside pad. This one is unique because it has a wear sensor at the top corner. Make sure to match it up. I also recommend replacing the pad clips to ensure that the pads slide freely. They may come with your brake pads, or you can buy them in a separate brake pad hardware kit. Just pop out the old clips. If you don't want to buy new ones, you can clean up the existing ones with a wire brush. And clean up any surfaces with a scraper, wire brush, or whatever's needed, so the new clips will fully seat. Then, pop in the new clips, and make sure they're fully seated. And here's an up-close look at them fully installed. There are no gaps. Next up is re-greasing the caliper bolt guide pins. They are supposed to freely move left and right. Remove the caliper pin guide bolt from the caliper bracket, clean off the pin, and apply new silicone grease. Then, reinstall it into the caliper bracket. And make sure the lip on the rubber boot seats in the groove on the guide pin. And repeat the process for the other pin. Remove it, clean it off, apply new silicone grease, and reinstall it. Next, install the new brake pads by sliding the ears into the brake pad clips. Sometimes it can be tricky to get the ears in the slots. You may need to push on the clips a little bit to get the pads in, then push the pads up against the rotor. Before installing the pads, it's often recommended to add grease on the ears where they contact the clips. I personally don't do it because it attracts dirt and debris and gums things up. I did not apply it in this video. Everything's looking good and we are ready to continue. With the new pads installed, we added additional thickness to the pad and rotor stack up. The caliper will no longer fit over it. The piston needs to be pushed in to make room for the new pads. Place an old brake pad against the piston, then use a C-clamp to push the piston back in. Now there's enough room to install the caliper back over the thicker brake pads. And when you push the piston in, the brake fluid level in the reservoir will rise, and technically it's possible for it to overflow. I've never experienced that extreme, but check the fluid level. Next, clean up the surfaces that will be in contact with the back of the brake pads. Then apply a thin layer of grease to those surfaces. Set the caliper back in position over the pads. You may need to push the guide pins in a little for it to drop down and sit all the way in position. And reinstall the two caliper pin bolts to secure it in place. And torque them to 26 foot-pounds. If it's just spinning, you can hold the guide pin with a wrench while you tighten the caliper bolt. And the caliper will float linearly on the pins. Next, reinstall the wheel. Tighten the lug nuts in a star pattern to 110 foot-pounds. Then lower the vehicle. And don't forget to remove the wheel chocks. And if the brake fluid cap is off, don't forget to put it back on. Then, before you drive anywhere, start the vehicle and press the brake several times to push the pistons in the calipers back out to operating position. Otherwise, if you go driving right away, your foot will go to the floor and you will not stop when you press the brakes. Then, do a controlled test stop to make sure everything is working properly. This is good to go. So, that wraps this up. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.